Hello everyone, it's Levine here, aka Story Minded, and I'm going to do the next video for the IGCSE English. This is another non-fiction text, and I've been back through the anthology, the 2016 version that I have, and I realised there's some other texts that I can still cover, so I will do those when I can. Once again, this is a blind read through, so this is the first time that I've encountered this text. I haven't done any preparatory work, reading it through, or analysis. I'm just going to go bit by bit and just try and give some ideas for what you might want to look out for. Something I would say, I think I've probably mentioned it in my other videos before, but the most important thing you can do as a literature student or English language student is whenever you encounter a text, don't just go off on your first interpretations. The best way you can prepare for an English exam, is to know your text inside out as much as possible, because when you have like a huge variety of texts, like in a massive anthology, you don't necessarily know what texts are. Even if your teachers tried to predict what texts are going to come up, you don't want to be thrown a curveball. You want to be comfortable with every single one of your texts. Obviously, you have some that you know better than others, but ideally you kind of want to have a good, strong foundation knowledge of all of them, because then no matter what text turns up in the exam, you're not going to have a panic in the middle of the exam thinking, oh, I don't know anything about this text, because you would have already done all the preparation work and have some ideas for how you want to analyse it. In terms of whatever question they throw at you, you'll just be like, oh, well, I could talk about this aspect of the text and so on. Okay. From A Game of Polo with a Headless Goat by Emma Levine. Oh, and I haven't got the context bit, but the context bit about her was that she writes about sports of different cultures, and this particular one is from an extract of a travelogue, which is like writing about someone's experience of travelling. We drove off to find the best viewing spot, which turned out to be the crest of the hill so we could see the approaching race. I asked the lads if we could join the wacky races and follow the donkeys, and they loved the idea. We'll open the car boot. You climb inside and point your camera towards the race. As the donkeys overtake us, we'll join the cars. But will you try and get to the front? Oh yes, that's no problem. So I guess already it's kind of got a very sort of carefree tone to it. And like the title of the races is like wacky races, and even the title itself inverts expectations, because polo is like a sport that's played on horses, where they carry those like wooden mallets and they like tap the ball, and polo is kind of like very much it's perceived as a very sort of upper class kind of sport. Like, I mean, the royal family have played polo and there are polo teams, and it's sort of categorised as a very sort of upper class sport, but this is obviously going to start talking about a different culture, so it kind of inverts expectations. I mean, if you're playing it with a headless goat, that's quite a graphic, visceral image, and it kind of inverts expectations. The two lads who had never been interested in the Karachi sport were suddenly fired up with enthusiasm. We waited for eternity on the brow of the hill, me perched in the boot with a zoom lens pointing out. Nearly 1 hour later, I was beginning to feel rather silly when the only action was a villager on a wobbly bicycle who nearly fell off as he cycled past and gazed around at us. Several vehicles went past, and some donkey carts carrying spectators. Are they coming? We called out to them. Coming, then came the reply. I was beginning to lose faith in its happening, but the lads remained confident. I guess this is, in terms of pace, it's a very fast-paced text. Like, that's already down to, like, the third paragraph. So you can sense that the structure itself is like a reflection of the build and anticipation. Like, all these different races are starting to occur, and it's kind of like building up momentum. Just as I was assuming that the race had been cancelled, we spotted two approaching donkey carts in front of a cloud of fumes and dust created by some 50 vehicles roaring up in their wake. As they drew nearer, Jacob revved up the engine and began to inch the car out of the lay-by. The two donkeys were almost dwarfed by their entourage, but there was no denying their speed. The Kibler donkey is said to achieve speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, and this looked close. The two were neck and neck, their jockeys perched on top of the tiny carts using their whips energetically, although not cruelly. So once again, it's kind of like the inversion of expectations, because obviously in British culture, like, horse racing is quite a big thing, but the fact that they're using donkeys is very different, and it kind of inverts expectations, but you still get the same kind of atmosphere in the writing, like the buzzing and the use of all the sort of visceral words, so like roaring, what is that type of word? My brain's gone blank. Not an adverb. It's a verb, like an action word, like all the sort of visceral actions that are happening. The noise of the approaching vehicles grew, horns tooting. Here we go, we're getting all the onomatopoeia, that's the word. Horns tooting, bells ringing, and the special rattlers used just for this purpose, like maracas, a metal container filled with dried beans. So that's in parenthesis, it's in the brackets, so that's kind of like giving extra information. So I guess in a way the author's trying to like immerse you in the culture of the people that she's watching in terms of their sport, and trying to like give you a sense of what it's like to be there. Men standing on top of their cars and vans, hanging out of taxis and perched on lorries, all cheered and shouted, while the vehicles jostled to get to the front of the convoy. It's also quite interesting in terms of, like, obviously it doesn't specify who the other spectators are. It seems to be very masculine in terms of like the spectators, and the kind of stereotypical gender roles of men. It seems like a very sort of like testosterone fueled event. Like, there's a lot of men, there's like vans, there's like lorries, and it just seems very brutal's the wrong word, I can't think of the right word, but it's a bit like a stereotypical football match. Like, I know obviously women do like football and stuff, but it just, in a traditional kind of sense, you kind of get the feeling that it's a very loud, rowdy sort of scene that's occurring. Jakub chose exactly the right moment to edge out of the road and swerve in front of the nearest car, finding the perfect place to see the two donkeys and at the front of the vehicles. This was Formula One without rules, or a city centre rush hour gone anarchic, which is lawless. A complete flouting, so that means breaking, of every type of traffic rule and common sense. I quite like the comparison she makes, because Formula One, once again, is like something that people like to watch, like with the racing cars and stuff, but how this is completely different. Our young driver, also this, I think this is a different race, yeah. Our young driver relished this unusual test of driving skill. No, it's about the donkeys. So it's like comparing the cars to the donkeys. Our young driver relished this unusual test of driving skills. It was survival of the fittest, and depended upon the ability to cut in front of a vehicle with a sharp flick of the steering wheel. No lane discipline here. Quick reflexes to spot a gap in the traffic for a couple of seconds, nerves of steel, and an effective horn. Oh no, sorry, it's getting confusing. So this is where it's like all starting to like crisscross, and everything seems quite chaotic. There were two races, the motorised spectators at the back, in front, the two donkeys. Oh, sorry, yes, okay. So the cars are trying to keep up with the donkeys to watch them. Oh, so that's quite interesting, actually. It's almost like, because that's like a difference in the ideas of observation and the idea of being a spectator, because your normal expectations would be, if you're a spectator of a sport, you're seated, like you might get up and jump and cheer and stuff, but you're kind of like a bystander. With this, they're actually racing alongside the racers, so I guess it makes it a lot more exciting. Where are we? I'll just read from here again. There were two races, the motorised spectators at the back, in front, the 2 donkeys, still running close and amazingly not put off by the uproar just behind them. Ahead of the donkeys, oncoming traffic, for it was a main road, had to dive into the ditch and wait there until we had passed. Jesus. Yakub loved it. We stayed near to the front, his hand permanently on the horn and his language growing more colourful with every vehicle that tried to cut in front. The road straightened and levelled, and everyone picked up speed as we neared the end of the race. But just as they were reaching the finishing line, the hospital gate, there was a near pile-up as the leading donkey swerved, lost his footing, and he and the cart tumbled over. Oh, the race was over. So that's a very short, snappy sentence as well, which kind of like all this build-up and then all of a sudden it's over. And then the trouble began. I assumed the winner was the one who completed the race, but it was not seen that way by everyone, so this is like a difference in culture again, potentially. Apart from the 2 jockeys and officials, and that's in quotation marks, who, it turned out, were actually monitoring the race, there were over 100 punters who had all staked money on the race and therefore had strong opinions. So that's kind of almost like, it's like a reflection of our culture in terms of horse racing where you place bets, but it obviously doesn't seem to be very well, I don't know if the right word is officiated, but there doesn't seem to be many guidelines in place for like fairness. Some were claiming that the donkey had fallen because the other one had been ridden too close to him. Voices were raised, fists were out, and tempers rising. Yes, it's very testosterone fueled, this scene. Everyone gathered around one jockey and official, while the bookmakers were trying to insist that the race should be rerun. Yakub and Iqbal were nervous of hanging around a volatile situation. They agreed to find out for me what was happening, ordering me to stay inside the car as it was swallowed up by the crowd. It's very chaotic. There's a lot of like chaotic imagery that's going on. And that's kind of that stereotypical sense that I was gaining in terms of tradition, like the fact she's a woman and they're making her stay. Like, not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because they are trying to keep her safe, but from a kind of traditional cultural point of view, the fact that they want her to stay in the car while everything's getting a bit heated, it's kind of like those gender stereotypes, which kind of emphasises that this is a out of the ordinary sort of situation. They emerge sometime later. It's still not resolved, said Iqbal, but it's starting to get nasty. I think we should leave. As we drove away, Yakub reflected on his driving skills. I really enjoyed that, he said as we drove off at a more sedate pace, but I don't even have my licence yet because I'm underage. So there's a lot of like semantic fields to do with the idea of lawlessness, and that would definitely be one of them. The idea that he's underage and yet he's driving and he hasn't got his licence. They both found this hilarious, but I was glad he hadn't told me before. An inexperienced underage driver causing a massive pile-up in the middle of the high-stakes donkey race could have caused problems. So, yeah, I guess it's sort of like, it's interesting because the passages are fairly long, but there's a lot of pauses within the writing. So I guess it kind of builds it up and it builds up anticipation. And yeah, it also moves quite quickly, like especially with that short, snappy sentence that the race was over once like that donkey's fallen over. It's like, that's it, the race is over. So I guess it would be focusing on the details and how like there's all these multiple races that are going on. The spectators are actually racing alongside the races to keep up. And I guess it really highlights like the cultural differences, and I guess focusing on the idea of how it inverts expectations. I can't really think of thoughts, and there's not really much thoughts and feelings in this. It's a lot more I can't think of the right word. Action, that's it. It's a lot more action based rather than reflective. It's kind of trying to put you in the moment of this excitement, like being surrounded by all these people and like stuff like that. Anyway, I hope this video helps. As always, if any of you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below, and I hope to make another video soon. Bye!